both direct and virtual conference. On the part of Vietnamese leaders attending the exhibition, we would like to welcome Her Excellency Tông Thị Phóng, First Vice President of the National Assembly, His Excellency Phạm Bình Minh, Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs, His Excellency Lê Hoài Trung, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, His Excellency Hoàng Xuân Chiến, Deputy Minister of National Defense, together with leaders representing ministries, agencies, organizations, and the diplomatic missions in Hanoi. To begin our program, we would like to call upon His Excellency Lê Hoài Trung, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, to deliver his opening remarks.
Madame Tông Thị Phóng, the first President of the National Assembly of Vietnam, Your Excellency Phạm Bình Minh, Deputy Prime Minister of Foreign Affairs of Vietnam, distinguished guests who are present here in person or watching online from different locations around the world. Vietnam is a country subject to severe consequences of hundreds of thousands of tons of unexploded ordnance left behind by the war. The one bomb weighing over 300 kilograms were discovered at the centers of the cities of Hanoi 10 days before. Once again reminds us that although the country has gone through decades of peace, the risk of landmines still exists on the entire 33 provinces and cities in the country, which threaten the safety of the people as well as to hinder the effort of socio-economic development. Similar to Vietnam, the world has more than 60 countries who are facing serious challenges due to the landmines left from the war. Therefore, overcoming the consequences of landmine, especially in the post-conflict area, is a priority of Vietnam when assuming the non-permanent membership of the UN Security Council, with a desire to share our experiences and contribute to international effort in this area for peace, security, stability, and development. Ladies and gentlemen, addressing the issues of landmine is not just the combinations of national effort and international cooperation, but also requires involvement of all stakeholders in the society. And in the experiences of many countries, including Vietnam, women have been making every important contribution. Therefore, in the framework of the conference, strengthen women's role in building and sustaining peace from commitment to resolve, the exhibition Vietnamese Women for Safe Ground is held to showcase the special role of the women in Vietnam, both as victims as well as stakeholders, to participate very actively and achieve remarkable results in the outcoming of to overcome the consequences of landmine after the war. Each photo is not only a cherished moment, but also the hidden stories about the life of survivors, examples of the brave women in danger, and above all, the hope and the daily revival in a land one was deadly obsession. In particular, the exhibition also has the presence and implementations of simulation activities with many practical tools and equipment representative from the female landmine crescent team in Quang Tri, along with the applications of virtual reality technology to depict the dangers of landmine incident. I would like to thank the Ministries of Defense, the Vietnam Mine Action Center, and the UNDP, International Committee for Red Cross, and the My Advisory Group, and many international organizations and individuals at home and abroad for extending the support to make the exhibition today, and also the financial support from the many embassies, including the support from the embassies of the US. I really appreciate your meaningful contribution and your effort to bring the safe land to the peoples of Vietnam. We wish you good health, success, and good luck.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Now we would move on to the ribbon cutting ceremony to open the exhibition. We would like to welcome to the stage Her Excellency Tông Thị Phóng, Standing Vice President of the National Assembly, His Excellency Phạm Bình Minh, Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs, His Excellency Lê Hoài Trung, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, and His Excellency Hoàng Xuân Chiến, Deputy Minister of Defense. Now I'd like to call upon the leaders to join in the ribbon cutting ceremony to open the exhibition. Vietnamese women joining in the defense of the protection of safety in Vietnam.
Xin trân trọng cảm ơn các vị.
Thank you very much.
Sau đây, xin được trân trọng.
I would like to call upon Her Excellency First Vice President of the National Assembly, the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister for Affairs, the representatives from the ministries, departments to view the exhibition, Vietnamese Women for a Safe Ground. Before we enter the international conference on women, peace and security, which will take place in the Grand Meeting Hall. As the exhibition will be open throughout the 3 days of the conference, we would like to request that you proceed into the audience hall for the plenary opening session. Thank you very much.
Cái kia xử lý xong rồi nhá. Cái này ok.
Testing, alo, testing.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the plenary opening ceremony of the International Conference on Women, Peace, Security, Strengthening Women's Role in Building Sustaining Peace from Commitments to Result will begin in a few minutes. Please take your seats and switch your phone to silent mode. We have arranged for simultaneous translation in two languages, English and Vietnamese, for your perusal. Those who are present in the audience hall, please double check your hearing devices. Thank you very much.
Em vừa nói với cái người nhỉ?
Xin kính mời toàn thể hội trường.
Please join us in welcoming Madame Tong Thi Phong, the first Vice President of the National Assembly of Vietnam, and Mr. Phạm Bình Minh, the Deputy Prime Minister and Ministers of Foreign Affairs of Vietnam, and also leaders of ministries and agencies in Vietnam. Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, warmly welcome all of you leaders, delegates, and participants to the International Conference under the theme Strengthening Women's Role in Building and Sustaining Peace from Commitment to Results, which is taking place in Hanoi from December the 7th to the 9th, 2020. In the combinations of physical and online format, this conference is hosted by the Ministries of Foreign Affairs of Vietnam in cooperation with the UN. Attending the conference today, the organizing committee would like to introduce on the Vietnamese side the first Vice President of the National Assembly of Vietnam, Madame Tong Thi Phong, Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Vietnam, Mr. Phạm Bình Minh, along with the leaders representative from ministries, agencies, socio-economic organizations in Vietnam, representative from the People's Committees and Women's Union from provinces and cities, and representative from women business leaders and women diplomats. On the international side, I would like to introduce Madame Puzile Mambo-Zuka, the Under-Secretary and Executive Directors of the UN Women, and ministers and senior officials representing the UN member states, and the UN resident coordinators in Vietnam, Mr. Kaman Manhotra, ambassadors, head of diplomatic mission, representative of international organizations in Hanoi, with more than 200 international participants attending online. To start the program, we would like to invite Deputy Prime Minister and Ministers of Foreign Affairs, Phạm Bình Minh, to deliver the opening remarks.
Your Excellency, Madame Tong Thi Phong, first Vice President of the National Assembly of Vietnam. Distinguished guests, Excellencies, Ministers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Let me great joy in welcoming all of you, distinguished guests, to today's international conference. In spite of the difficulties posed by the COVID-19 pandemic and differences in time zones, your participation, be it physical or virtual, from more than 70 countries, speak to your commitment to the global agenda of women, peace, security, and the multilateral efforts for peace, security, and development as a whole. Ladies and gentlemen, our meeting is convened at a meaningful time on the theme of strengthening women's role in building and sustaining peace from commitment to results. The year 2020 marks the 75th anniversary of the United Nations and the birth of landmark documents on gender equality and the role of women, including the 1979 Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, and the 1995 Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. Most strikingly, this year also marks the 20th year of women, peace and security becoming a global agenda led by the UNSC Resolution 1325. Adopted in 2000. The road from political will to action had not been easy. Great efforts have been made in this undertaking by the international community and women themselves, with their aspirations and willpower. This highlights women's important role in peace and security and their weighty contribution to building and reinforcing peace. In every part of the world, women have taken up an active role in conflict prevention and settlement and post-conflict reconstruction. They have engaged significantly in making, maintaining, and building peace and are taking the lead in shaping and promoting social development and progress. At the UNSC, women, peace, and security has become a key agenda involving 10 resolutions adopted since 2000, has been mainstreamed into most of its documents. It is regrettable, then, that many challenges yet remain. Many countries and regions are still embroiled in war, conflict, poverty, and epidemics. Gender-based violence remains a scourge. The lives and dignity of women are still under threat. Many girls are unable to go to school. Women are still confronted with political, economic, and cultural barriers as they are deprived of necessary support to play the rightful role, or even marginalized from social development. The COVID-19 pandemic threatens to reverse the progress in realizing the Sustainable Development Goals and strip away valuable resources for protecting and advancing the rights of women worldwide. Therefore, through this conference, Vietnam calls on the international community to heighten the commitment and determination in promoting cooperation on global gender equality. We should arrive at measures to mobilize resources for women's more substantive role and participation in fostering and enhancing peace. Today, we should focus on reviewing the attainments in realizing the global agenda on women, peace, and security over the past 20 years, and the implementation of Resolution 1325 and related resolutions of the UNSC. We should evaluate challenges encountered, share experience and good practice, set out a new approach. Together set out a new approach, reaffirm a commitment to coordinating policy orientations and actions on this matter. Ladies and gentlemen, Vietnam underwent immense pain of wars to achieve peace and independence and surmounted countless hardships for successful reconstruction and development. This process witnessed the sacrifices and contributions of women over generations. Accordingly, Vietnam gives priority to gender equality, to promotion of women's role and contribution to peace building. We also advocate for this matter at multilateral forums at the United Nations and ASEAN. The entire political system of Vietnam has been exerting efforts to put in place laws and policies on gender equality, ensuring the rights, interests, and roles of women in all spheres of social life. Vietnam was one of the first countries to ratify the 1979 Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women and reflected in our domestic laws. We have been vigorously implementing the 1995 Beijing Declaration and Platform of Action, achieved multiple Millennium Development Goals and Sustainable Development Goals, including those on gender equality and women's empowerment. As a non-permanent member of the UNSC, Vietnam worked with other countries in drafting and advancing Resolution 1889 in 2009 on the role of women after conflicts, and will continue to advance the agenda of women, peace, and security during our 2020-21 term of office. Vietnamese servicewomen have been present and will continue to make an even greater presence in the UN peacekeepers. Ladies and gentlemen, all over the world, women have committed themselves to making momentous changes happen and will continue to do so. Within them burns the flame of courage, dedication, and hope in a brighter future for generations to come. Let us spread that flame far and wide at this event and on the journey to realize the noble goals under the global agenda of women, peace, and security. In that spirit, I'm convinced that our event will be a great success. I wish you health and happiness. Thank you very much. Thank you, Your Excellency.
To continue with the program, I would like to invite the first Vice President of the National Assembly of Vietnam, Madame Tho Thị Phóng, to come to the stage to deliver the keynote address.
Your Excellency, Mr. Phạm Bình Minh, Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Vietnam, ladies, gentlemen, distinguished guests, it is my great pleasure, honor to attend and speak at this important conference of the UN on a very meaningful theme, being strengthening women's role in building and sustaining peace from commitments to results. Chaired by Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs Phạm Bình Minh, and delegates from Hanoi, Vietnam. We voice a strong support from Vietnam to the conference theme and its purpose of building and reinforcing global peace and reviewing the implementation of UN resolutions and to honor women in their efforts for peace and national construction in the new era. Ladies and gentlemen, the history of mankind has witnessed innumerable conflicts, large and small, including the two destructive world wars in the previous century, which have inflicted incalculable pain and loss. Human history is also imbued with the desire and the struggle of nations and peoples in pursuit of peace. The birth of the United Nations kindled hope among the international community for a more peaceful, stable, and prosperous world. This noble and rightful aspiration burns ardently today still. Yet the struggle remains arduous, as conflicts and poverty persist in many places, threatening the lives of hundreds of millions, especially women and children. On this long journey, women play a critical and indispensable role. They nurture love and warmth in each household. They are a font of support, strong and sacrificing. They are fighters, bold and brave. They are diplomats of great wisdom and acumen in negotiations for peace. They are also leaders, talented and full of heart. At the fiercest hotspots all over the world, the service women of the UN peacekeepers and women negotiators and leaders of communities and nations are tirelessly dedicating themselves to cultivation of peace, for development, and a brighter future for many generations yet to come. This reality has also proven how the role and participation of women are not merely a prerequisite for peace, security, and development in so many places, but truly a direct contribution to the long struggle for gender equality and women's empowerment all over the world. Ladies and gentlemen, in recognition of the pursuit of independence, freedom, and the right to life, peace, and happiness, 20 years ago, the UNSC adopted Resolution 1325. This was the first proclamation of the role and contribution of women in preventing conflicts and in building and reinforcing peace. Since then, the international community has maintained a strong commitment in thoughts and in deeds to the agenda of women, peace, and security, as well as to other important international pledges, such as the Beijing Platform for Action and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. These crucial commitments have also been realized and mainstreamed in numerous legal institutions, policies, plans, and strategies for economic and social development of countries, including the building and realization of the national action plans for women, peace, and security. However, we must candidly note that there remains a large gap between commitment and reality, as we are faced with many hardships and challenges in meeting objectives under this agenda. The lives, dignity, and fundamental rights of women are still under threat in a regional and global security environment of growing complexity and instability. In many places, conflicts and violence, especially gender-based violence, persist. Along with poverty, epidemics, climate change, natural disasters, terrorism, and crime, they exert a considerable impact on women and children. The presence and contributions of women in negotiations, reconciliations, and international peacekeeping remain quite modest. In addition, gender-based barriers in society present a considerable hindrance to the rightful desire and efforts of women to rise. Ladies and gentlemen, these challenges and hardships, especially against the backdrop of the COVID-19 pandemic, are an urgent call for stronger actions to enable and ensure full, equal, and meaningful women's participation in the processes of conflict prevention and settlement and post-conflict reconstruction, the maintenance of peace, and the promotion of social cohesion. These are critical elements for building and reinforcing sustainable and inclusive peace. To this end, we need to focus on three key aspects. First, to strengthen common understanding among society at all levels on the role of women in the peace and post-conflict reconstruction processes, to break down gender-based barriers and prejudices and better protect and uphold the essential rights, interests, and needs of women and girls in and after conflicts. Second, to attach due importance to women in the policies, strategies, and initiatives at the national, regional, and international level on security and development, including efforts to address non-traditional security challenges. Accordingly, women need to be the direct beneficiary of peace and social progress. They must also be equipped with knowledge and skill, be empowered economically and politically, and be given access to science and technologies to fully and equally participate in the making of decisions and policies. Third, the international community must maintain the political commitment to the agenda for women, peace, and security, substantialize them in connection with the Sustainable Development Goals. We must also step up international cooperation and sharing of resources and experience to link together our efforts and augment their effectiveness for concrete and enduring results. In this process, developing countries must be given due attention, assistance, and support in accessing finance, technology, and market to catch up with the march of our time. Ladies and gentlemen, like many countries in the world, the history of Vietnam's national building and defense bears the distinguished hallmark of our women and their contributions. Vietnamese women are immersed in the tradition of heroism, unyieldingness, loyalty, resourcefulness. Their contributions are immense, be such in our national liberation, the building of peace, and the national development in the era of Doi Moi and international integration, or in the crafting of the national cultural identity alike. Our President Ho Chi Minh once said, and I quote, "The tapestry that is Vietnam by the hands of women, old and young alike, is woven and made beautiful and bright." In war, Vietnamese women comprise a solid home base of the front line, and it was they who suffered the greatest losses. Through a multitude of movements, Vietnam was able to rapidly mobilize vast and robust revolutionary heights, calling forth the combined strength of tens of millions of women across the country in the struggle for national liberation and reunification. Today, the war is decades into the past, yet the memory of countless Vietnamese mothers and wives remain intact of the heroic struggle of our nation and their pride in their revolutionary children and husbands who shared a part in that fight for independence, freedom, and peace that our motherland enjoys today. Our state honors them with the most esteemed title of Heroic Vietnamese Mothers. This is a recognition of the motherland, of the boundless contributions and sacrifices by the mothers of Vietnam. It is a consistent policy of the Communist Party and State of Vietnam to fully promote the immense role and potential of women in our national construction and defense, to raise the standing of women, and to advocate gender equality in every domain: political, economic, cultural, and social. These key lines for action have been enshrined in our Constitution, in our law for gender equality, and in our numerous laws and policy lines. Vietnam has in place clear strategies and plans for economic and social development until 2045 in order to advance women's contributions in making Vietnam a modern industrial country by 2045. Given the highest level of commitment and the solidarity and consensus of the entire people, Vietnam has been translating these policy lines into results worthy of pride. Vietnamese women play a key role in policy making. Exemplary Vietnamese women are assuming leadership positions in the party and the state. The President, the Vice President of the National Assembly, and the Vice President of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam, the Chair of the Mass Mobilization Committee. Women account for 27% of the National Assembly seats. Numerous are female heroes of the armed force and heroes of labor, high-profile diplomats and legislators, scientists, skilled workers, influential voices, and renowned artists. Thousands of women-led enterprises are playing their part in the transformation of Vietnam. The social awareness on gender equality is steadily on the rise. The work on gender equality in Vietnam is recognized by the UN as a highlight in the realization of the Millennium Development Goals. As the ASEAN Chair and President of IPA 41 this year, Vietnam lent a strong voice to assert the role and contributions of women in all spheres of life. Vietnam also advanced numerous initiatives, including the high-level meetings and summits on women's empowerment and the promotion of women's role for sustainable peace and security, held for the first time under the framework of ASEAN. At the UN, as a non-permanent member of the UNSC, Vietnam joined other countries in drafting Resolution 1889 in 2009 on women and girls in post-conflict situations, and will continue to prioritize the agenda of women, peace and security during our term of 2020-2021. In the Central African Republic and South Sudan, Vietnamese service women are, as we speak, contributing to the noble peacekeeping mandate entrusted to them by the UN. Today, 17% of the Vietnamese forces dispatched to the UNPKO are women. This ratio will continue to increase moving forward. As recently, the National Assembly of Vietnam has adopted a resolution on participating in UN peacekeeping forces. This is an important legal groundwork for ensuring gender equality and increasing women's presence in this line of work. Ladies and gentlemen, 75 years ago, from a colonized people living in great misery, from the shadow of poverty and backwardness beneath the heels of colonialism and feudalism, under the leadership of the Communist Party of Vietnam and our great President Ho Chi Minh, the Vietnamese nation and the Vietnamese will rose in triumph. We regained our independence and freedom, thus proclaiming our rights as an independent and free country, emancipating our people and winning back the right to life and equality. These include, of course, the roles and rights of women as enshrined in the first Constitution of Vietnam in 1946. That women and men are equal in all respects. Today, in Hanoi, the capital of Vietnam, the city recognized by UNESCO as the city of peace and a creative. I and all of us share in the confidence in the topic of our present discussion. It is truly an occasion to join Vietnamese people and women in building a world without war, without violence, without discrimination, a world of sustainable peace where all can live in peace, where women have truly become the masters of their own destiny. I wish you good health and happiness. May our conference be a resounding success. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, the first Vice President of the National Assembly of Vietnam, Madam Dr. Phong. Next on the agenda, we're going to have the remarks from the ministers from member countries. And I would like to invite His Excellency Mr. Park Sok-khum, the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Cambodia, to take the floor.
And UN Women for jointly organizing it and for inviting me. Women and girls have the power to transform and nurture positive development. They can help build fair, inclusive, prosperous, and peaceful societies. Nevertheless, stereotypes about their potentials and relevance continue to exist, and no less in the domain of peace and security. From its tragic past, Cambodia has witnessed the might and resilience of women in rebuilding our society and engendering a peaceful and secure environment that is vital for economic and social development. Cambodia thus welcomed the UN resolution on women, peace and security in building and sustaining peace, as well as the SG 7-point action plan on gender-responsive peacebuilding. Gender equality is one of the core values upheld by our government and mainstreamed in all our national development policies and strategies at all levels. With our government efforts, women now represent 41% of our civil society service workforce in 2020, and a growing number are now engaged in leadership and decision-making positions. We enjoy better social protection and support through the promotion of access to healthcare, legal advocacy and justice against violence, human trafficking and sexual exploitation, and economic resources such as through the expansion of credit for micro, small, and medium enterprises, of which 61% go to women. Excellency Chair, engaging women in peacekeeping is another facet of Cambodia's commitment to promoting women's empowerment through their enhanced role in building a peaceful world. Since 2006, Cambodia has deployed 419 women out of the total 7,123 peacekeepers to UN peacekeeping mission in 9 countries. This year, 92 women are on mission among the 781 troops deployed in 5 countries. Cambodia now ranks number 2 in ASEAN, just behind Indonesia, and number 17 in the world for its share of female troop contribution to the UN PKO. On effective implementation of the UN Security Council Resolution 1325 and 1889, as well as compliance with the UN SG Annual Report on Women, Peace and Security Agenda, I believe member states should A, pay close attention to the plight of women and girls who face increasing violence and economic hardship due to the effect of COVID-19 pandemic. B, promote recognition of women as the backbone of the societies and is an indispensable force for sustained peace and sustainable development. C, strengthen international norms that enable women to exercise equal rights and to participate actively in political, security, economic, social, and cultural fields, and mainstream these norms at national level. D, enhance effort to end gender-based discrimination and encourage women engagement in decision and policy making. In closing, I reaffirm Cambodia's continued determination to increase its women recruits, create conducive environment for women to realize their full potentials, and expand their participation in sustainable development and peace-building process around the world. I wish you all a successful conference. Thank you.
Xin trân trọng cảm ơn Phó Thủ tướng Chính phủ, Bộ trưởng Ngoại giao và Hợp tác Quốc tế Campuchia. Tiếp theo chương trình, xin mời bà Maria Ubach Ifont, Bộ trưởng Ngoại giao Andorra phát biểu.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, dear Minister, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Let me, at the outset, congratulate the government of Vietnam for organizing this international conference and for its work as a member elected to the Security Council. We recognize that Vietnam has spared no efforts to enhance the work on the role of women in building and strengthening peace. The commemoration of the Foundational Resolution 1325 is a major occasion to reinforce its goals. Andorra, aware of the privilege of durable peace for 7 centuries, profoundly values what peace means. In the multilateral arena, at our scale, we thus support actions that can lead to the implementation of the resolution, and we commend the role of the Security Council in boosting and monitoring women's peace and security at the country missions. In this regard, we contribute to programs and trainings on conflict prevention and the role of women in peace building. Indeed, the OSCE, jointly with UNODA, organized, for instance, since 2017, with the support of Andorra, a training for 50 professional women on arms control, disarmament, and no proliferation. Andorra considers women empowerment, women education, and women economic development as the principles that have to be reinforced. We also strongly advocate for women participation in politics. As women can be responsible for the decision, their involvement in state and local institutions is not only a guarantee that these bodies better represent society, it also increases the probability of avoiding conflicts. Mr. Chairman, democratic national institutions are basic instruments of conflict prevention. Education too. We are absolutely convinced that quality education for all is a strong component of social cohesion and respect of human rights. This is also a guarantee for inclusion of girls and boys for their equal participation, eliminating stereotypes that could lead to discrimination, conflict, and violence. A society with no gender equality cannot be a democratic society and is then more likely to suffer civil conflicts. Andorra, in cooperation with the Council of Europe, has developed tools for the education on democratic citizenship. These tools will hopefully be available outside European borders, as they are useful and practical instruments to teach and develop the respect for diversity, social cohesion, and respect for democratic rules, as well as a critical spirit. Andorra also advocates to fight impunity as it legitimates violations of human rights at national level or through the ICC as a court of last resort. In the case of the more serious crimes, justice has to be made. Victims have to be heard and listened and provided with reparation. We would like to stress the importance of the Trust Fund for Victims of the ICC. Andorra contributes to this fund since 2008, as we consider its role as fundamental. The Trust Fund is a unique framework that provides assistance to the victims of unimaginable atrocities. Sexual violence against women and girls are used as weapons of war. Women and girls as civil victims must be protected, helped and healed. They also must be part of the process of the conflict resolution and reparation. The participation of women in these steps are indispensable for a long-term reconciliation. Allow me to insist on their participation on the post-conflict governments that should be enhanced too for a long-term reconstruction. Conflicts do not have to monopoly of violence against women and girls. Gender violence is a universal course that takes place every day. The current pandemic we are facing has revealed an increased level of violence against women, more worrisome than ever. But this violence is not a result of the pandemic. It has only revealed an existing violence that was underestimated. As long as gender equality is not totally established, women will be more likely to be objects for discrimination and for violence. To conclude, gender equality and women participation are key for conflict prevention and sustainable peace. To this achievement, the toolbox contains education, justice, reintegration, empowerment, and planning. I would like to thank all those who work for a more peaceful world, the UN peacekeeping forces, and above all, women present today who hopefully will enhance a more peaceful future. I thank you for your attention.
Xin trân trọng cảm ơn Bộ.
Thank you, Your Excellency. To continue, I would like to call upon the Honourable Marise Payne, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Australia.
Thank you very much, Chair and colleagues, and it's a great pleasure to join you late this evening from Australia. So, Your Excellencies, my friend, Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Ming, Madam Nguyen, the Chairwoman of the National Assembly, and the Executive Director of UN Women, I am very pleased we could all come together in this challenging yet important 20th anniversary year of the foundational Women, Peace and Security Resolution, United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325. I thank particularly the Government of Vietnam and the UN Women for their generosity in hosting this very important and timely conference. This October marked 20 years since the unanimous adoption of the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325, creating such an important milestone in the global peace and security agenda. I want to pay tribute to those women and those leaders who ensured the adoption of Resolution 1325. I think we would all agree that this agenda has never been more important or relevant to the world as it is today as we respond to COVID-19 together. And coming together like this provides a unique opportunity for us to take stock of how far we have come in our aim of achieving inclusive and sustainable peace and security 20 years on. Reading the UN Secretary-General's 2020 report on women and peace and security, we see that while the WPS agenda has evolved, there is still much to be done. Here in the Indo-Pacific region, we have seen an increased focus on the WPS agenda, to address drivers of conflict and instability, as well as new and emerging threats to security. We value strongly our growing partnership with ASEAN on women, peace and security. It is striking to see the advances from ASEAN's first joint statement on women, peace and security in 2017 to discussions now on the development of an ASEAN regional action plan. Australia looks forward to furthering collaboration, including co-hosting the second ASEAN-Australia Women, Peace and Security Dialogue in 2021. I have also been working this year with Pacific counterparts under the auspices of our Pacific Women Leaders meetings to inform relief, recovery and reconstruction efforts during COVID-19. From Australia, we have engaged in very practical ways to support the WPS agenda. For example, we contribute to the PeaceFem app development using data from Monash University's Towards Inclusive Peace project funded by Australia. The app offers best practice guidance to practitioners to ensure gender provisions are included in peace agreements, as well as a way for parties to collect and disseminate data. Under the Australian Government's Partnerships for Recovery strategy and our ongoing partnership with UN Women, we provided funding to the Women, Peace and Security Global Facility and the Women's Peace and Humanitarian Fund to support local women's networks and peace builders to deliver positive public messaging, provide psychosocial support, address increasing levels of gender-based violence, and reduce isolation and exclusion during the pandemic. We also support access to essential sexual and reproductive health services through an initiative implemented by the International Planned Parenthood Foundation and the United Nations Population Fund. Australia is playing a leading role in mainstreaming gender into countering violent extremism or CVE policy through the Global Counterterrorism Forum, as we recognise the importance of building a deeper understanding of the motivations behind radicalisation to violence and the role of women and girls in terrorist organisations. Domestically, Australia introduced our first National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security in 2012. We're now in the process of reviewing and developing our second. As the UN Secretary-General remarked in his report, COVID-19 has exacerbated gender inequalities, but continuing inequalities are by no means inevitable. We have evidence of what works to safeguard women's rights, keep moving forward in the aftermath of conflict and crisis. Women's full, equal and meaningful leadership and participation as essential and committed agencies for ensuring security, stability and recovery. This anniversary year is not only is a reason to celebrate our successes, marking 20 years reminds us that achieving gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls is everyone's responsibility. I thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this forum, and I wish you all a very productive conference.
Xin trân trọng cảm ơn Bộ trưởng Ngoại giao Australia. Tiếp theo chương trình, xin trân trọng kính mời bà Karina Gold, Bộ trưởng Phát triển Quốc tế Canada phát biểu.
Thank you so much, and good morning from Ottawa in Canada. First of all, I'd like to thank Vietnam and the UN for co-convening this meeting, which Canada is very pleased to support. Women in Southeast Asia face rising extremism and targeted violence, made worse by the conditions thrust upon them by COVID-19. The pandemic has magnified existing conflict and fragility. This situation threatens to undo hard-won gains to see women included in peace-building processes. We cannot let that happen. That is why Canada is pleased to announce $8.5 million over 5 years to UN Women to empower women, prevent violence, and promote social cohesion in Southeast Asia. This commitment will help to address gender equality and discrimination against women and girls in ASEAN member states and advance the women, peace, and security agenda in the region. Women's voices and leadership not only make a difference, they bring lasting peace that benefits their communities and countries. The evidence shows that this is true. Why then, 20 years after the adoption of UNSCR 1325 on women, peace, and security, is women's expertise on peace and security issues still routinely overlooked? Earlier this year, the Women, Peace, and Security Focal Points Network, co-chaired by Canada and Uruguay this year and next, met to look at why this implementation gap exists. What we heard confirmed that women peace builders are still rarely represented in formal peace and security decisions. They lack funding for their work and they are targeted by threats of violence. Sometimes they are attacked just for daring to work in peace building. Never before has broadening our efforts to implement the WPS agenda been more important to achieving sustainable peace around the world. From supporting girls' education in crisis and conflict situations to supporting women's organizations on the front lines of the COVID response, we can't afford to let this important work be sidelined. Canada recognizes that we must act with urgency to address the rising levels of violence against women peace builders and ensure that they are adequately funded. We have already increased our contribution to the Women's Peace and Humanitarian Fund with its new window for local women's organizations that are responding to COVID-19, as well as a window to ramp up women's participation in peace processes. And Canada has contributed $300 million to the Equality Fund, which gets funding to women's organizations and networks. Right now, Canada is developing a dedicated $5 million funding envelope to support grassroots partners who are addressing funding gaps for women peace builders. And I am proud to tell you about the new Women, Peace, and Security Awards we are launching to recognize the achievements of leading women peace activists, from practitioners to researchers. And we will also use the awards to acknowledge civil society organizations and networks making outstanding contributions to advancing women, peace, and security, both in Canada and in fragile and conflict situations. They will also include a research award with the International Development Research Center to encourage innovative research in fragile or conflict-affected states. Canada's National Action Plan on Women, Peace, and Security is a key part of our feminist foreign policy. We are committed to supporting the work of women peace builders, human rights defenders, and women-led civil society organizations and networks before, during, and after conflicts. We track our efforts and work closely with civil society to evaluate our results. It is important not to underestimate the power of impact-driven, evidence-based plans to address gaps in implementation. Finally, I warmly welcome leadership by ASEAN member countries to advance the agenda, and I'd like to encourage all of us to keep up the momentum. More than ever, we all need to pull together. I especially want to thank all of the women peace builders out there for their tireless efforts. You are an inspiration to us all. Thank you for having me join this morning in Canada and this evening in Vietnam.
Xin trân trọng cảm ơn Bộ trưởng Phát triển Quốc tế Canada. Tiếp theo,
Minister of Foreign Affairs of International Development of Canada. Now I would like to invite the Ministers of Foreign Affairs of Kenya.
Thank you very much for according me this opportunity to address this august assembly. I extend my warm greetings to my colleague, the Minister from Vietnam, and the excellencies and distinguished guests present here today, all protocols observed. I wish to commence by thanking the government of Vietnam for inviting us to this conference. The theme, Strengthening Women's Role in Building and Sustaining Peace, from Commitments to Results, is a timely reminder for all of us to convert rhetoric into practical action in national, regional, and global efforts aimed at implementing United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325 and its supporting resolutions. This conference allows us to look into the mirror and to ask ourselves why we have not fully succeeded in protecting women and girls from conflict-related violence, and why women's views and voices in processes relating to peace and security are still relatively imperceptible. This conference is unique because it is set within the context of the ongoing global COVID-19 pandemic that has served to exacerbate the situation of women in conflict-ridden areas. Their vulnerability has become more glaring and their safety more urgent. As an incoming non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, Kenya has selected women, peace and security as one of its key priority issues during the length of her tenure in the Security Council. The government of Kenya demonstrated its commitment to the implementation of Resolution 1325 by launching its first national action plan in 2016. And this year, it launched its second action plan. In addition, we have increased the number of our women peacekeepers and mediators and placed women in positions of influence in the security sector in our country. Despite these milestones, the salience of Resolution 1325 in our national peace ethos still requires recalibration and wider acceptance. This scenario is replicated at the international level, where despite the existence of groundbreaking resolutions and a fairly universal acquiescence at policy level that the full and meaningful inclusion of women in the realization of sustainable peace is essential, it is still clear that substantial transformation is yet to be fully realized on the ground. Now, this may be explained by long-standing challenges of patriarchy and other negative social cultural perceptions that have served to institutionalize the marginalization of women's contributions in conflict resolution and peace building. Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, resolutions such as UN Security Council 1325 will not effectively serve the cause of peace and security if they are not implemented and remain just glorious pronouncements. There's an urgent need to work harder at translating policy into tangible action and to travel away from rhetoric to the destination of pragmatism 20 years after the birth of Resolution 1325. First, we must accept that the Women, Peace and Security agenda requires context-based elaboration and not mere templating. We must be wary of the one-size-fits-all mentality. Furthermore, the implementation of the agenda requires a great deal of political will and a solid commitment by government and stakeholders to the advancement of women as a foundational principle. Second, our understanding of the language of international resolution should be re-examined. There's a tendency to interpret these resolutions from a top-down perspective, thereby favoring increasing the participation of women at high-level decision-making positions, as opposed to also marshalling the power and the energy of women at the grassroots level. Hence, national action plans must also turn their attention and their advocacy in the direction of women within their communities to enable ownership of the agenda at the bottom of the pyramid, which is often the locus of the impact and ramification of conflicts. We must distinguish between peace and society and peace in society. The latter entails tapping into developing and invigorating grassroots peace-building networks, and also considering the quality of the contribution of women to peace and security, and not just the number of women decision-makers, peacekeepers, and negotiators alone. Within the African context in particular, peace-building initiatives must also investigate, record, and appropriate indigenous women-based conflict resolution knowledge and practices, which are often overlooked or devalued in the formulation of peace agreements and post-conflict stabilization and rebuilding plans. In addition, we must creatively repackage the women's peace and security agenda in ways that embrace emerging issues such as climate change, countering terrorism, and the prevention of violent extremism, epidemics, and so on. Further, the idea of peace, gender equality, and social cohesion should be incorporated into our educational curriculum so that these notions are implanted into our communities at the earliest stage. Over time, we have learned in Africa that there's a strong nexus between peace, security, and development. Peace creates the conditions for development, and development in turn bolsters peace and human security. Accordingly, there must be a strong alignment between the women, peace, and security agenda and the sustainable development agenda. There can be no peace where poverty and inequality prevails. Thus, national development plans, strategies, as well as international and regional interventions must by necessity mainstream the link between peace and development and surface the contribution and interests of women in this regard. Here we underscore food security, health, education, water and sanitation, employment, and protection from violence as critical for women. We must also augment the participation of women in peace and security spaces by allocating them adequate and reliable funding. Thus, at national level, governments should include and mainstream the women, peace, and security agenda into their national yearly financial planning. Many action plans lack specific budgets, making implementation choppy, uncertain, and ineffective. Resource implication must, however, be data-driven so that funds and resources are targeted at the right programs and that they meet the needs of women squarely. Data makes women visible and surfaces their needs and contribution. Thus, the collation and collection of gender disaggregated data is absolutely essential for the success of the women, peace, and security agenda. Let us continue to celebrate the efforts of women peacekeepers. Let us continue to reach out and protect our young girls. Let us continue to refresh our efforts for women and their contribution in advancing peace and security in our societies. I thank you for your kind attention.
Xin trân trọng cảm ơn Bộ trưởng Ngoại
Thank you, Your Excellency, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Kenya. I would like now to call upon Your Excellency Denise Ronaldo Colindra, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Nicaragua.
Distinguished delegates, we apologize for the technical problems. The technician teams are working on fixing the problem from Nicaragua. We couldn't hear the sounds from Nicaragua. Can you Please check the sound from Nicaragua.
Hello, 1, 2, 3. Can you hear us?
Yes, we can hear you now. Thank you.
Okay. Vamos a recomenzar. Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Her Excellency, Madame Tong Thi Pung, Permanent Vice Chairman of the National Assembly, His Excellency, Mr. Pham Binh Minh, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam, Her Excellency Mr. Phung Sil Mlambom Phuca, Under-Secretary General and Executive Director of UN Women, ladies and gentlemen, ministers and delegates. We convey the cordial greetings and best wishes for health, prosperity, and peace from the President of the Republic of Nicaragua, Commander Daniel Ortega Saavedra, and from Comrade Rosario Murillo, Vice President of the Republic. Especially to the women builders of peace in the world, in their countries and communities. We appreciate the invitation of the broader government of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam to this important conference in commemoration of the 20th anniversary of Resolution number 1325 of the UN Security Council and the launch of the Agenda for Women, Peace and Security. Our fraternal greetings to the heroic and dignified Vietnamese women who have contributed to the strengthening and sustainability of peace at different stages of its history. For the government of Nicaragua, women must play a leading role in all affairs of the state and society, as well as in the construction of the nation. Women in Nicaragua are progressively advancing in the process of strengthening their rights and their leadership for the common good. The Government of Reconciliation and National Unity of Nicaragua continues to promote in a sustained manner the leadership and prominence of women for their integration and active participation in the economic, political, social, and cultural spheres, in faithful compliance with the political constitution and the international instruments of human rights. Nicaragua has been recognized by the World Economic Forum in Davos, placing it in 5th place in the world in the Global Gender Gap Index. It ranks us as the country with the greatest gender equity in the various countries in our America. Nicaragua ranks first with regard to the number of women in ministerial positions globally. The empowerment of Nicaraguan women has been a fundamental factor in achieving the peace and stability that our country enjoys today. Mr. President, currently in Nicaragua, in the executive branch, 57% of positions are held by women. In the judiciary, 60% of positions are held by comrades women, including 41% of the magistrates in the Supreme Court of Justice. In the legislative branch, 46% are women, with 57% of women deputies on its board of directors of the National Assembly. In the major offices, local governments in Nicaragua, 46% are exercised by women, as well as 60% are deputy majors. In the electoral branch, 40% of the magistrates are exercised by women. In the office of the General Audit Office of the Republic, 50% are women, and in the board of directors of the Central Bank, 57% are comrades women. The prominence of women in Nicaragua contributing to peaceful coexistence has positive and constructive results, and we continue to advance. Mr. President, we reiterate the importance of participation and decision-making by women on an equal footing in initiatives aimed at the prevention and resolution of conflict and the maintenance and promotion of international peace and security. Sustainable development will only be possible with the effective participation of women with gender equality and equity. Today, that we commemorate the 20 years of the Resolution 1325 of the United Nations Security Council, the Government of Reconciliation and National Unity of Nicaragua reaffirms the vital role that women play in the prevention and resolution of conflicts and in the consolidation and sustainability of peace. Thank you very much.
Xin trân trọng cảm ơn Bộ trưởng Ngoại giao Nicaragua. Tiếp theo, xin trân trọng kính mời bà Carolina Arce Battle, quyền Bộ trưởng Ngoại giao Uruguay, phát biểu.
Good morning and good afternoon, Your Excellency, Mr. Pham Binh Minh, Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Vietnam, Your Excellency, Madame Funsile Lambonuca, Under-Secretary General, Executive Director of UN Women, Foreign Ministers, representatives from Member States and participants. Firstly, I would like to express Uruguay's gratitude to the government of Vietnam for organizing this important conference on women, peace and security, with the valuable support of the United Nations, in particular UN Women. Uruguay is very pleased to participate in this conference, and we welcome the invitation made to provide remarks at the high-level opening segment. This current year, 2020, is a very special one, not only because the entire globe is facing a pandemic, but also because, on a more positive note, the international community is celebrating the 20th anniversary of the adoption of the UN Security Council Resolution 1325 of year 2000 and the establishment of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda. The international community is also celebrating this year the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, and of course, the 75th anniversary of the Charter of the United Nations. In this regard, Uruguay reaffirms its strong commitment to advancing and implementing the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, including strengthening women's role in building and sustaining peace through tangible and concrete actions. In achieving this objective, we strongly believe in the central role of multilateralism and cooperation between member states. For the sake of brevity, I would like to share first Uruguay's perspectives on the importance of women's role in building and sustaining peace, and then some of our most recent actions taken in order to advance and implement Women, Peace and Security Agenda. Uruguay ratifies the importance of national ownership and leadership in peace building, whereby the responsibility for sustaining peace is broadly shared by the government and all the other national stakeholders. And in this regard, we underline the importance of inclusivity in order to ensure the needs of all segments of society are taken into account. In this context, we stress the need for the full, effective, and meaningful participation of women in peace building as an important factor in the sustainability of efforts to build and sustain peace. This concept includes the need to take into account the distinct experiences of women and girls in conflict situations, and of promoting women's role at all stages of peace processes, particularly in prevention and post-conflict scenarios. In advancing and implementing the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, Uruguay has been taking many actions at the national, regional, and international level. Some of the most recent actions include, at the national level, Uruguay is finalizing its Women, Peace and Security National Action Plan, which will be the result of a strong and fruitful process of dialogue and coordination among national stakeholders and will provide a clear pathway to better direct our efforts aimed at strengthening women's roles. Moreover, Uruguay encourages women's participation in peacekeeping operations and has been consistently increasing the quantity and quality of its female peacekeepers. This policy has also been articulated at the multilateral level, for example, through the support and active participation in the LC initiative, as well as through the implementation of the Action for Peacekeeping initiative. A clear example of our commitment to increasing female participation in peacekeeping is the involvement of Uruguay in the development of the concept of mixed engagement platoons, which aims to better engage with local communities at the field level through, among other things, better women's participation. In 2019, the first Uruguayan engagement platoon was deployed in MONUSCO, and we are committed to continue to serve the United Nations. Last but not least, Uruguay is also honored to co-chair, together with Canada, the Women, Peace and Security Focal Points Network, which is a platform aimed at implementing through concrete actions the Women, Peace and Security agenda. To conclude, it is clear that in this particularly challenging context of a pandemic, it becomes even more crucial for the whole international community to redouble our efforts to ensure the full, equal and meaningful participation of women in all aspects of peace and security, and to fill the gaps in implementation of the Women, Peace and Security agenda. Uruguay will remain a trust, fully engaged and proactive partner to work with. I thank you all for your attention and wish everyone a successful event. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Ladies and gentlemen, due to technical issues, the Under Secretary General of the UN have authorized the country representative of UN Women in Vietnam to deliver her report. The floor is yours. On behalf of the Under Secretary General of the UN.
Excellency, Madame Tong Thi Phong, Permanent Vice Chairwoman of the National Assembly. Excellency, Mr. Pham Binh Minh, Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Vietnam. UN Resident Coordinator, Mr. Kamal Malhotra, Excellencies and Ambassadors. I will read the speech on behalf of the Executive Director of UN Women, Dr. Puncilla Mlango Nguka, Undersecretary General and Executive Director of UN Women, and she really apologizes for not being able to deliver this speech in person herself. It is a great pleasure for UN Women to have worked closely together with the government of Vietnam, the UN system, and the Resident Coordinator's Office to organize this international conference on women, peace, and security. 2020 is not over yet, and we're saving the best for last. Vietnam has given us one more chance to commemorate the 20th anniversary of Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security with an impressive collection of high-level officials, distinguished experts, and activists all ages and corners of planet. In 2009, when we were preparing for the 10th anniversary of 1325, Vietnam proposed a resolution on women, peace, and security that was meant to focus on women's rights in post-conflict situations and peace building, recovery, and reconstruction. Their choice of focus was not random. Vietnam had spent the previous 3 decades rising above the devastation caused by war, and they knew firsthand how hard it is and how important it is to get it right and to build back better. I suspect that Ambassador Rosemary DiCarlo, who will provide the keynote speech in the session following this opening, will remember this day well, because she was the sole ambassador, woman ambassador, sitting in the horseshoe table in the Security Council that day, representing the United States. The resolution drafted and tabled by Vietnam addressed many usual elements: the unacceptable exclusion of women from peace tables and negotiations, the scourge of wartime rape, or the need for countries to adopt the national action plans on women, peace, and security. Up to that day, only 16 countries had adopted such a plan. Now, that number is 91. But apart from the usual elements, it included many firsts. For example, it was the first resolution on women, peace, and security to encourage member states in post-conflict situations to address women's needs and priorities, including sexual and reproductive health and rights. It was singularly focused in mobilizing the peace-building architecture, the Commission, the Fund, and the Support Office, prioritizing gender issues in post-conflict needs and needs assessments, and push for monitoring and tracking funds allocated to addressing women's needs. But it also prompted important strands of policy development within the United Nations that would deeply change the way we would work over the coming years. It mandated the Secretary General to submit 2 things to the Security Council. One, a set of indicators that could serve as the basis for common reporting, and second, a special report on women's inclusion in peace building and planning in the aftermath of conflict. Those indicators are still the tools we have to report yearly to the Security Council on progress and have inspired similar monitoring frameworks in regional organizations and countries all over the world. And that report on women and peace building led one of the most impactful and measurable changes in the UN's work on women, peace, and security: the significantly stronger integration of gender equality and women's empowerment in peace-building work. As part of many other measures, the Secretary General asked at least 15% of post-conflict funding to be dedicated for programs whose main objective was advancing gender equality. As many of the participants of this conference know, one of the success stories of the last decade has been the increasing greater investments of the Peacebuilding Fund on women's empowerment. This may all sound like bureaucratic jargon, but it translated into tens of millions of dollars of new resources that were reoriented to women-led economic recovery and social cohesion in countries recovering from conflict, and an important knock-on effect on other UN agencies and major donors who also made efforts to track their spending on these issues and provide more funding. And it all started with Vietnam's initiative, and that resolution in the Security Council, a positive example of smart policy making in a multilateral organization. It is for that reason that I wanted to open this high-level conference by thanking Vietnam for their role in the history of women, peace, and security, and thanking all of you who will give their time over the next 3 days to take stock of what has been achieved, point to where we're falling short, and set us on the right path for the next decade, and a breath of new life in our common cause. Thank you.
Xin trân trọng cảm ơn trưởng đại diện UN Women tại Việt Nam. Tiếp theo chương trình, Xin kính mời phần phát biểu ghi hình của ngài Ara Ayvazian, Bộ trưởng Ngoại giao Armenia.
I have a pre-recorded message from the Minister of Foreign Affairs of
Congratulations to the government and people of Vietnam for hosting this important international conference. This year, we mark the 20th anniversary of the landmark UN Security Council Resolution 1325, which accelerated political participation and economic empowerment of women in the context of peace building, conflict prevention, and conflict resolution. It is our deepest conviction that women do have a powerful role in terms of driving change towards peace, and that efforts related to security can be much more sustainable with women as equal partners in conflict prevention, settlement, and rehabilitation efforts, as well as in upholding sustainable peace. Armenia, as a member of the Human Rights Council, has highlighted among its commitments the implementation of the National Action Plan under the UN Security Council Resolution 1325, Women, Peace and Security Agenda, considering it instrumental in terms of protecting the women living in conflict zones and ensuring their active contribution to the peace building and post-conflict reconstruction and rehabilitation. Taking into account that the protection and promotion of human rights and fundamental freedoms, gender equality, as well as ensuring the active role of women in all phases of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, are among Armenia's priorities. The government of Armenia approved the first National Action Plan for 2019-2021 and implementation of timetable for fulfillment of provisions of the UNSCR, Women, Peace and Security, in February 2019. Thus, Armenia became the 80th UN member state to have adopted a 1325 National Action Plan. Dear Chairperson, the recent aggression against the people of Nagorno-Karabakh, perpetrated by Azerbaijan with the full political and military support of Turkey and involvement of Turkish-sponsored foreign terrorist fighters, has put the lives of 150,000 people of Artsakh, including many women and girls, under existential threat and has made the issue of protection of the affected population urgent. Perpetrated amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, Azerbaijan's unlawful, indiscriminate, and disproportionate military attacks, shelling and bombardment have heavily affected the region's critical civilian infrastructure, including the healthcare and maternity capacities. Thousands of displaced families face shortage of food, water, and access to medical care. Today, there is a necessity to implement individual socio-economic and rehabilitation programs, including socio-psychological rehabilitation for women and girls residing in the conflict-affected settlements, as well as women that have been forced to move to Armenia. Armenia, as a strong supporter of the universality of human rights and their equal, non-discriminatory, and non-selective approach, as it is emphasized in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, underlines that adherence to this principle is key in the context of the humanitarian response when assistance should be provided to civilians affected by hostilities on the ground. People of Nagorno-Karabakh are a reality on the ground, and the hesitation of the presence and direct involvement of international organizations is unacceptable. Social problems of the Armenians of Artsakh and the humanitarian crisis in Artsakh must be addressed on the ground in order to ensure a speedy return to normal life. Dear Chairperson, Armenia continues to hold the major responsibility for ensuring the respect and protection of women's rights, and fulfilling this responsibility by ensuring the implementation of fundamental international documents on women's rights, including the UN Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women, the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, Global Objectives for the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and other key instruments. These instruments serve as a basis for the development of various national strategies in the field of women's rights and gender equality. Thank you.
Xin cảm ơn Bộ trưởng Ngoại giao.
Thank you, Your Excellency. We will now move on to the video message from the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Bangladesh.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. As this year marks the 20th anniversary of Security Council Resolution 1325, we thank the government of Vietnam for organizing this timely event. Excellencies, the sexual violence that was inflicted on 200,000 of our women and girls during our War of Liberation in 1971, and the traumatic experience that our women had to endure at that time encourage us to create a safe, secure, and enabling environment for women to realize their inherent potentials. Immediately after our independence, our father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, placed women at the heart of our development agenda. His able daughter, Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, ensured justice for those horrendous crimes, recognized those victims as war heroes, and ensured further development and social, economic, and political inclusion of women. Our women have not only been victims of war, they also actively participated in our War of Liberation. Since independence, our women seized their empowerment through education and integrating them into economic activities, and thereby enabling them to perform non-traditional roles beyond their households. Women in Bangladesh are now active agents of our socio-economic changes and development initiatives. Their role, particularly in disaster management, rescue and recovery, has been noteworthy. We have also pioneered women's participation in peacekeeping. In the current context, women play essential preventive role in addressing emerging security threats, including violent extremism. We recognize women's role in influencing community and family values and identifying early signs of radicalism, and encourage their leadership at the community, national, and international levels. Our strong faith in the ability of women as the agents of peace has been complemented by laws and regulations and affirmative actions program. It is also to ever played a critical role in the adoption and implementation in very low, around 6% in mediation and UN military observers following Secretary General's on many fronts. There are some challenges. To allocating at least 15% scenario should work to ensure a few specific points in this regard. For ensuring a gender-responsive approach, women's meaningful participation through national partners need to support ensuring justice and accountability in a conflict-affected country, in cases where the state should take the responsibility. Their perspective should be made an integral part. Provisions need to be allocated in peace, and sustained financial provisions are also critical. Should be forthcoming in making necessary investment. 20th anniversary of WPS agenda, being platform of action, and also conduct and recommit to working and sustaining peace. I thank you.
To conclude our discussion, public.
Madam Under Secretary General, event. 20th Nations Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security. It is truth that gender equal participation contributes to longer and lasting peace. This is because in many parts of the world, many women and girls continue to experience multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination. The threat multiplier is committed in the institutional framework. In promoting substantive gender equality, the National Action Plan on Gender Equality, National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security 2024, which is peace building, as well as to accelerate gender equal participation by systematically mainstreaming an intersectional gender perspective. And last but not least, gender responsive peace building requires talks. As a final note, please allow me to, therefore, if we want the peace builders and peacekeepers. Thank you.
And gentlemen, the opening ceremony of the International Court would like to call upon the Deputy Prime Minister.
Các vị lãnh đạo.
Thank you. The Missions, Charter Affairs.
Xin trân trọng cảm ơn
on the Excellencies, distinguished guests to visit the exhibition of Vietnamese women at this meeting hall. Please return to this hall.
Alo, alo. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. Tí nữa có. Thích chưa? Thích chưa? Tí nữa có. Alo, alo. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10. Alo. Alo, alo. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10. Alo. Alo. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10. Thì con nghe tiếng không? Không có tiếng à?
Ơi.
Alo, alo. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10.
Mình ngồi với.
Vâng.
Mình phiên dịch quên. Ok.
Alo, alo. Anh nhớ bấm em nhá. Quên nhiều quá. Tôi có bị có lợn tiếng Việt vào không?
Đúng rồi, bởi vì
Alo, alo. Alo, alo, một
Alo,
hai
một
alo,
hai một alo một alo.
sao tự mình bị làm, tự mình bị làm, tự mình bị làm. Alo, một hai ba bốn năm sáu bảy. Alo, alo. Không. Thế này em nghe thấy à? Anh đâu đang nghe nào nào? À, chưa cắm. Anh cứ nghe thấy không? Đây này, anh nghe bên này này, anh nghe đây này. Alo, một hai ba bốn năm sáu bảy tám chín 10. Alo, 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 alo. Alo, một hai ba bốn năm sáu.
Hello.
Hello. Tay nghe thì mình nghe người ta nói. Tay nghe kia. Sao không cầm sang này sang bên này được à? Thế để tôi sang bên này. Tôi sang bên này. À, anh ngồi bên này nhìn. Anh cầm mic mà. Nói ai vừa hỏi. Mình không nghe được gì cả.
Testing.
Yes, it's a tell.
Chặt không nè. Kai, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you, Thailand.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Anh Thanh ơi. Bỏ xuống đi. Bây giờ cho xuống không? Được, còn thiếu hai bà chưa vào không? Còn thiếu hai người bên đây này. Thiếu hai người. Nhắn rồi. Anh nhắn gì? Bây giờ cho nó xuống đúng không? Cho thả xuống. Anh kiểm tra xem ai đủ chứ. Đây là Nayati là ai đây? Đây là ai? Anh thấy con Nayati là ai đây? Cuối cùng này. Tên đi ngồi ghi. Email không phải tên. Thiếu hai người.
Look, I'm just testing my video. This is Sana Mandolini. Can you hear me?
Please be seated and switch your mobile phones to silent mode. Thank you.
Ladies first plenary session
Now begins the session. And His Excellency Xiong Bo.
Kính thưa quý vị và các bạn,
in peace building and women's mission of earlier commitments made to will be placed on learning about successful practices. We have three very distinct privilege to now first introduce and then invite to the first keynote Undersecretary General of the UN Department of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, who is the senior most leader at the global level on the political and peacebuilding affairs. Ms. DiCarlo advises the UN Secretary General political missions carrying out peacemaking. Keynote speaker I'd like to introduce, who is the first Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of Mexico and very senior and accomplished career diplomat. Mexico is currently a non-permanent Mexican Foreign Service in 1990 and has held kingdom. Third keynote, Munterfering, 2013. German on women, peace and security issues, Rosemary DiCarlo.
Happy to be here with you all together with grassroots women peace builders to discuss component of the women, peace and security, including this year, as both women have always been leaders in war, advocating for equal. This experience is Bandaranaki laureate, girls educate 3 signatories to the Paris. Yet despite the many clear examples and activism by women and women's participation, the women, peace and security agenda increased significantly. Protesting an end to the excessive use of state force and play in building stronger and more resilient and bringing an end to the civil war. Women have facilitated dialogue, the milestone, leading to the systematic integration of gender equality in just and inclusive ways is so successfully requires that we recognize women's leaders. Despite this understanding, obedient decision-making and disseminating trust. With the pandemic exacerbating political life, it is vital that women look to the specific ways we can support women's leadership. Those of us who occupy seats of power, to peacemaking, from pandemic response to elevate women peace builders and promote their work. Ensure it informs peace and security by gender discrimination, with support reconstruction efforts a dominant women's advisory group. We must continue to advocate, consult regularly with women's groups, and use a range of innovative, context-specific methods to support women's dialogues and ensure the civic space. We should bring the weight of civil society. The elimination of violence against women, including domestic violence, electoral reforms to facilitate women's national parliamentarians in conflict-affected assistance, including just this year in Bolivia. These efforts need to be underpinned by adequate, predictable US $6 million to support the Bangsamoro peace cohesion and community resilience essential to long-term efforts. This is why we have scaled up the peace building funds in 2019. And seventh, and finally, in close cooperation to pursue complementary priorities is to be understood as fundamental to achieving sustainable peace. As we look ahead to the next decade, we must all do it is only with women's full
Make his remarks 8 to 10 minutes.
From Mexico City, I too want to United Nations, particularly to Executive Director of UN, the Gender Agenda. I'm honored to join you today and to share this panel to continue to work with Vietnam as we begin our term now. It has been 20 years since the act of armed conflict on women and girls, as well as peace. It has also been 25 years. Nevertheless, we still find ourselves with the need to stress, as well as to be able to build and maintain inclusive. Mexico echoes UN Women's call to 19 and as we advance in our recovery processes, political and economic systems. We are clear to explicitly advance their interests and aspirations. Many leaders' declaration at the summit that was held just under 2. We collaborated both with Germany and with our Viet as ASEAN chairs. This co-chair, the Generation Equality Forum, convened along of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. A compact on women's fields to strengthen accountability and the ideas and proposals that we're going to discuss permanent members of the Security Council. The women will also continue to actively promote the participation of women. Present our first national action plan on women, chair and highlighted just before me by Undersecretary in conflict and post-conflict settings. Peace operations, UN Women, humanitarian agencies. Second, we call on the impact had on women and girls. The UN Department of Peace operations, including of young women, in mediation, the establishment of more women mediation network building initiatives. Our team in Mexico City as well in New York exchanges. Dear friends, there is brought and sustained a gender-based approach, policies and programs. The leadership, this continues to be so. Thank you very much.
Ventura, I will now ask...
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would have been no meeting at all because the advancement Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Pham Binh Minh, and I'm very much hope to have addition that people write down their Christmas wish here on my list, opportunity to build into it. And one of these conclusions must be more to welcome Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, former president of Liberia, to a digital women's night, Mrs. World. And she also talked about in the world. Women are able, courageous women that took to the streets. Peace builders are protecting the implementation of resolutions to the UN Security Council for our work. We have pushed hard to include mainstreaming approach, needs whenever possible. So countries to share their... One thing is clear, we will on the ground because it is civil support, funding and protect in peace processes. We have done so in peace process. In addition to the 5.5 million peace builders, they often risk their lives who defend others. Ladies and processes becomes the new normal, but this we have to get active ourselves. And therefore, of course, ensure that diplomats are aware of focal points in our embassies. Fairer, true, if we join our forces and make Berlin.
Thank you very much, Madam Muntefering. I would like this, and for the rest of Plenary 1, allow me now to all panelists in advance, and of course that they can focus on briefly in conflict prevention in post-conflict situations, of UN Security Council resolution of the COVID-19 pandemic have contributed to this. I'm now going to brief Foreign Affairs and Trade. Ms. Guevara became Australia's first the ambassador of China to an ambassador of the People's Republic of China to Vietnam since Mrs. Pascale Beresville, Switzerland Beresville, was her country's state secretary, the first woman ever to head the Swiss diplomacy. Principal advisor on gender and on women's peace and security was appointed in 2015 of UNSCR 132 from the United Nations, Professor Political and Peacebuilding Affairs. Ms. Coronel Ferrer, in the signing of the Comprehensive Agreement, Ho Chi Minh City Peace and Development Foundation, of the National Assembly's Foreign Affairs Committee, and Walini, a leading academic and civil society leader, excellent order of the British Empire for Women, Peace and Security at the London School of Economics, Society Action Network. But not least, Ms. Rosa Emilia Salamanca y Economica from Colombia, Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, contributive for reflection and action, which calls for a transform such a distinguished panel. And I would, 5 minutes, please.
For hosting and organising this particularly important, this 20th anniversary obviously is an ideal time and opportunity for the WPS agenda more broadly. We should acknowledge the significant 1325 and its many subsequent resolutions. We've seen the Human Rights Council, the UN General Assembly, structured strategies on how countries can practically implement this work through their national action. Value of women's full and meaningful participation. For example, women are 35% more likely to last at least 50, higher implementation rates and longer lasting peace. However, unfortunately, as results, and this was an issue that was identified, of course, by the executive director when she noted that in peace negotiations from 1992 to 2019, women were signatories to peace agreements. The Secretary General reiterated that the impacts of limited representation in his and political processes, attacks against women, human rights defenders, humanitarians, and peace builders continue to underrepresented in decision-making processes in peace-building efforts and underrepresented in recovery and reconstruction, including peace building. As the ministers today and Undersecretary are even more marginalised in peace processes, women, human rights defenders, and peace builders are often left exposed, threatened, and less protected. Funding constraints to implementing the WPS commitments and supporting women's rights. Australia's focus on advancing the WPS agenda has centred on full, equal and broad initiatives that we recognise. Australia's been a long-standing contributor to the 2 UN Women Funds focused on WPS, the Women's Peace and Humanitarian Fund, which supports work on grassroots and community organisations to amplify women's voices, agency and leadership in conflict prevention, crisis response and peace building. We also support WPS Global Facility in supporting larger scale projects to strengthen women's role in peace building and to address barriers to participation. We must also, of course, reflect on the strong gender parity strategy target for women serving in UN operations in 2020, who is currently the force commander of the UN peacekeeping mission and for women in leadership in UN missions. We will continue to engage actively in multilateral forums to promote this work. As a member of the Human Rights Council and in the UN Security Council and the General Assembly, Australia has worked actively on all of these as the UN Security Council President and Vietnam as the 2020 ASEAN host and chair. And Minister Payne participated in the ASEAN Ministerial Dialogue in 2538 on the role of female peacekeepers. We know that women are real, and I hope that we've demonstrated some of those examples and shared them with you this evening. We know that we cannot do this alone, that we really must continue to work together to achieve these goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I will now ask His Excellency Xiong Bo, China's ambassador to Vietnam, to speak. He will speak in Chinese. It will be simultaneously translated in English, and the Vietnamese version will be distributed in print.
Thank you, Mr. Malhotra. I'm instructed by my headquarters to deliver a short remark. This year marks the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, the 25th anniversary of the fourth. China supports Vietnam in convening this conference and hopes that the international community can take this opportunity to reaffirm our commitment and build consensus. First, continue to support women's important role in peace and participate on an equal footing in peace process in a comprehensive and effective manner, continuing to support women's empowerment and reaffirm our commitment to Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, capitalizing on the decade of action and the delivery of SDG so that women empowerment becomes the early harvest of the 2030 agenda. Second, advance the WPS agenda in a holistic and balanced manner. This includes promoting our work in the 4 pillars of prevention, protection, participation, relief, and recovery in a balanced way, making every effort to prevent conflicts and rooting out the breeding ground for violent actions against women, strengthening protection for women and firmly cracking down on terrorism and extremist forces that women fall victim to, respecting women's right to speak and decision-making, and supporting more women to participate in peace negotiations, mediation and conciliation, and national governance, protecting women's legitimate rights and interests, and providing timely humanitarian assistance to women affected by conflicts. Third, deepen global cooperation in supporting women's development. The international community should uphold multilateralism and the authority of the UN, the Security Council, the General Assembly, the Peacebuilding Commission, and UN Women should work in accordance with their respective mandates. In addition, we need to give full play to the unique strengths of regional and sub-regional organizations and guide women groups and NGOs in playing a constructive role. China has been actively promoting global cooperation in women's development. At the high-level meeting of the UNGA on the 25th anniversary of the 4th World Conference on Women, President Xi Jinping put forward the important initiative of convening another global leaders meeting on gender equality and women's empowerment in 2025 and announced another $10 million donation to UN Women. When it comes to maintaining international peace and security, Chinese women have never been absent. Over the past 30 years, more than 1,000 Chinese women participated in UN peacekeeping operations and made important contributions at different posts. China is ready to work with the international community, continue to promote the WPS agenda, and support women in playing a greater role in peace and security. Dear guests, Vietnam attaches great importance to women's advancement. As ASEAN chair this year, Vietnam has hosted the ASEAN Women Leaders Summit. The meeting of women parliamentarians of AIPA, the ASEAN Leaders Special Session on Women's Empowerment in Digital Era, which are positive contributions to promoting women's participation in ASEAN community building, COVID-19 response, and to women's empowerment in the region and the world at large. I hope with the joint efforts of all parties, this conference could inject new impetus to the peace, security, and women agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Bo, for those remarks. I would now like to invite Her Excellency Mrs. Pascale Bereswil, Switzerland's permanent representative to the United Nations in New York. The floor is yours, Madam.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, dear colleagues, I would like to start by thanking as much the United Nations as the government of Vietnam for inviting us to participate in this conference. It is a particular honor for us as a country, but also for me personally. I was posted to Vietnam exactly 20 years ago when Vietnam was working on legislation against violence against women. And I had the honor of being in New York when Vietnam was serving in the Security Council last time, and when Vietnam, during its presidency, developed and was the pen holder of Security Council Resolution 1889. It was actually a pioneer resolution because it was the first Women, Peace and Security resolution to focus on reconstruction after conflict, and it was the first resolution of the Security Council to have an indicator system. So if the moderator is asking us what is the most important lesson with the Women, Peace and Security agenda, I think most of the distinguished previous speakers of this conference have highlighted the three things that we must prioritize for the next 20 years if we want to be true to our Women, Peace and Security commitments. It is implementation, implementation, and implementation. We have a very good framework, but we have to implement it. So in order to support that objective, let me highlight three elements that my government believes to be particularly important in ensuring greater participation of women in peace processes and more gender-sensitive peace-building efforts, and therefore truly sustainable peace. First, a peace process is more than the official negotiation table. We know that now. Sustainable peace is not achieved by politicians or us diplomats and the military alone. Women-led civil society organizations are often engaged in prevention activities, respond to emerging crises, and engage in confidence-building efforts throughout the conflict long before official discussions are initiated. And we can see that also particularly well when they are at the front lines now during the COVID pandemic. We need to design inclusive peace processes that value diverse contributions from civil society to the private sector. This means creating better links between official talks and informal peace initiatives. Strong platforms such as the Women, Peace and Security Focal Points Network can create such links. My country is looking forward to co-chair this network jointly with South Africa as of 2022. Also, women's leadership in the public sphere has a direct link to women's direct participation in peace processes. Mediators are often personalities with a diplomatic or political career, and negotiators often have a background in politics, the military, or the economy. We therefore need to empower women in these fields, and we need also to train them. Women mediator networks are a means for women to exchange among peers, learn from each other, and gain visibility in this competitive field. Last year, Switzerland supported the African Union's Women Mediator Network FemWise induction training, which gave 38 women the possibility to join the network. Early next year, we will be piloting a network of Swiss women engaged in mediation and peace process. Second, national action plans on women, peace and security are a critical instrument. My country was among the first countries to adopt the NAP to implement Resolution 1325. In its fourth reiteration, our NAP has the effective involvement of women in conflict prevention and the inclusion of women in conflict resolution and peace processes as key priorities. We are also closely working with civil society partners on best approaches for economic empowerment to enable women a better participation in peace processes. And third, a gender-sensitive analysis is key to determine which actors to engage with and which topics to discuss. It is not possible to design inclusive peace processes or achieve sustainable solutions if the analysis is gender blind. One of the challenges here is the lack of availability of gender disaggregated data. More efforts need to be invested in this field. Switzerland will be hosting the UN World Data Forum in 2021, which will be a good occasion to address this issue. Therefore, if I conclude, the Women, Peace and Security agenda has always been innovative. We need to continue on that path. And my country, while approaching a membership in the Security Council, is certainly going to put a lot of energy and focus on a better implementation of 1325. So let me close with the following observation. Women's direct engagement and leadership in politics is an issue of equal rights. In 2020, we have to make sure that women are not excluded from processes that define the political, economic, and social future of the society they are living in. Collectively, we have a responsibility to commit to action and implement the vision of gender equality that we developed 20 years ago. It is in our hands. I thank you very much again for this wonderful conference, and I'm looking forward to continue our cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Bereswell. I'll now call upon Her Excellency, Ms. Mara Marinaki, the European Union's Ambassador and Principal Advisor on Gender on Women, Peace and Security, and Resolution 1325. Madam, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon from Brussels. And a big thank you also from the side of the European Union to our hosts, Vietnam and UN. A special thank you to UN Women for bringing all of us together today. And I would like to commend especially Vietnam's efforts to help drive the Women, Peace and Security agenda, not least during its tenure in the Security Council and as pen holder of Resolution 1889, which has indeed paved the way in helping formulate a solid background for the assessment of the progress made on women, peace and security. And we also welcome the timeliness of today's event since the European Union, together with ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, has opened a new chapter in our long-lasting relationship by becoming strategic partners just a few days ago. And among the key areas of priority are the emphasis on our shared values, and this includes effective multilateralism and peace and security. And of course, an important emphasis among the peace and security priorities is on the women, peace and security agenda. Indeed, in the last 2 decades, we have celebrated a lot of firsts in women's changing roles and their promotion to leadership capacities, though still a lot is still to be done. We take pride in all the achievements since the adoption of Resolution 1325. At the same time, we know with concern a very serious backlash against women's rights, which has been growing in recent years, and it has taken an even more negative trend during the ongoing COVID pandemic, which has further exacerbated cases of violence against women and girls. And we have also noted a very negative trend of record levels of political violence targeting women and girls that went unreported due to confinement restrictions. And this was also included in the report of the Secretary General in his latest report on women, peace and security. And we also should highlight and flag the shrinking space for civil society and women, human rights defenders and women activists. All of the cases of violence against women, including killings, sexual violence, abductions, and more violence, taking as victims women and girls, are strongly reprimanded, and perpetrators should be brought to justice. One key lesson from the 20 years of 1325 is that we should be proud of our achievements. And this includes a very strong normative framework, the sharing of our knowledge and know-how, and increased alertness on gender-sensitive training. Nevertheless, we can improve, we can perform better, and the European Union has already set a 33% of participation of women in all EU activities and projects related to peace processes. And this is one of the actions that we have already included as priorities in the EU Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security. We have just adopted a new and very ambitious overarching EU policy on gender equality and women's empowerment called the Gender Action Plan 3, where among its clear objectives is to lead by example. And this is an area where we have been focusing already in our partnerships. We are making the gender-responsive leadership as the norm for EU institutions, and we aim to contribute for a more gender-equal world, since we have also integrated in our policy the full policy framework on women, peace and security, together with important priorities such as trade, climate change, migration, digital transition, humanitarian action, and development cooperation. All in all, we aim for a bottom-up and top-down approach. We take the lead and we join up efforts with all our partners to make this a successful reality. Thank you very much. Back to you, Hanoi.
Thank you very much, Madam. I now turn to my colleague from the United Nations, Dr. Miriam Coronel Ferrer. Miriam, the floor is yours. Can't hear you. Can you turn on your mic?
In response to two of three questions given to us panelists, I will highlight committed leadership and of action plans to implement UN Security Resolution 1325. In 2019, the UN Secretary General asked assure the integration of the goals of UNSCR 1325 in the work of the missions. As a member of the UN standby team involved in supporting two ongoing processes, supporting in particular the Office of the UN Representative in the Geneva International Discussions on Georgia, and the UN Assistance Mission in Afghanistan, where, as you know, talks between the Taliban and the government of the Republic have already commenced. Each mission is situated in inclusive mediation practices and outcomes, where women take part in deciding the present and the future, and for leadership in political missions to ensure the integration of WPS goals in mission work and objectives. We Ken Marie DiCarlo, whom we heard earlier, have shown such commitment is needed at all levels. Regrettably, though, data UN member states, or a mere 45%, have national action plans. Of those who have national action plans, only 1/3 have an allocated budget for implementation. Only 26 SNAPs, or 31%, include references to disarmament and provide specific action to the society. Slightly better is the recognition of civil society as important actors in implementation, with 75% allocating a specific role to civil society, but this role, again, is often limited to an advisory position. In the ASEAN, there's much catching up to do, with only the Philippines, Indonesia, along with East Timor, with national action plans. To its credit, ASEAN has adopted the Regional Action Plan on the elimination of violence against women. We hope that, like the EU and the AU, ASEAN will soon have its Regional Action Plan on 1325. UNSCR 1325 provides a cohesive framework to mainstream gender concerns in all aspects of peace and security. Country-specific NAPs are effective tools to set benchmarks, undertake gender-responsive conflict analysis and programming, and establish accountability. In fact, further localization is important through LAPs, or local action plans, such as what have been developed in my country, in some provinces and regions of my country, the Philippines, where conflict and the needed peace-building focus may vary from place to place. Liberating women's agencies from the shackles of discrimination and unequal policies and practices in both the private and public spheres remain a big challenge in the 21st century. Most institutions charged with peace and security remain gendered and male-dominated, as do most social institutions such as religious organizations, tribal communities, clans, and families. Advancing women's meaningful participation and equality at all levels have largely been driven by organized women. Conflict in society and politics are often treated as national security concerns, forgetting the human security dimension that make up the underlying causes. I have highlighted one key tool in advancing WPS, and that is through action plans at different levels. In the next 20 years, perhaps we cannot expect that the rest of the global community follow through on their commitments to WPS in words and in deeds through comprehensive and well-funded national action plans on UN Security Resolution 1325. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Miriam, and thank you for keeping to time. There's a clock out there for everyone to watch. So please, the next speaker, Madam Tonnuthinen, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. From a civil institution perspective, I'd like to emphasize 2 points. I believe, as is stated in UNSC Resolution 1889, presented by Vietnam in 2009, that we need to focus not only on the protection of women, but also on their empowerment in peace building. To that end, we should consistently adopt the holistic approach embedded in the peace humanitarian development nexus. This calls for proactive political resolve together with practical initiatives at different levels to prepare women to truly effectively be part of the solution. by providing education, training, and on-the-job grooming and mentoring. In other words, combining a top-down and bottom-up approach. Political resolve needs to effectively become a catalyst, a trigger for change to happen, by daring to entrust women with roles and responsibilities mostly associated with men, and providing them with relevant capacity building opportunities. In my country, Vietnam, Project Renew from the US, together with Norwegian People's Aid's field operation for cleaning up wartime bombs and mines in Quang Tri province, is led by a Vietnamese woman, Nguyen Thị Diệu Linh, and in 2018, she helped launch an all-woman team of trained and professional clearance technicians. Vietnamese female officers, alongside their male colleagues, are taking part in UN peacekeeping missions in Africa and have won accolades from the organization. In other words, women can effectively rise to what is required in the peace-building processes if they are assigned the responsibility and also provided, as may be necessary, enabling conditions to make up for the historical lag time or cultural barriers. In fact, one might think of political proactiveness through adoption of quotas along the peace-building chain, where and when appropriate and feasible. This has worked in the economic and business sphere with recommended quotas for women on corporate boards in some European countries. Why not then in the peace humanitarian development nexus? We have to believe in women's abilities and fortitude, especially in times and situations of crisis, including conflict and now the pandemic. The second point I wish to emphasize is the enabling regional framework between the global and the national local, especially in the present context of global multilateralism under stress. For Vietnam, and I assume to varying degrees for all members of our regional organization, ASEAN offers both a welcome point of reference in these uncertain and challenging times, and a much-needed stimulating space for collaboration and synergies. It is encouraging to note that ASEAN has advanced the women, peace and security agenda by consistently adopting since 2004 a whole set of declarations and plan of action, and in this pivotal 2020 year, holding 3 women, peace and security related meetings, including 2 at ministerial level. Regional approaches allow countries to share lessons learned and tackle common challenges. They also create stronger linkages between governments and civil institutions. There has not been armed conflict among ASEAN countries for several decades. This does not mean that issues of potential friction and tension do not exist, which often relate to and affect women and minors, and involve countries of origin, transit, and destination, such as human trafficking and bonded labor, unprotected, undocumented migrant labor. These require common regional approaches and remedies in which women should partake if they are to be sustainably effective. I would also like to bring up a vital issue for many, and I believe ultimately all ASEAN members, and that is the Mekong River livelihood, development, security, and peace nexus. I hope that the challenge consists in how to establish in the long run a modus operandi and modus vivendi that is beneficial to all, including women making their livelihood in farming, fishing, and tourism. The negotiation process, diplomatic, economic, and technical, would gain from proactively involving women up to leadership levels. Without a holistic approach taking in all dimensions involved, no sustainable security and peace can be ensured in the Mekong sub-region. In other words, Mr. Chair, I submit that this issue be given proper attention and devoted adequate resources and processes involving women by all members of ASEAN to build up sustainable uses and management of the Mekong waters into an exemplar of regional peaceful coexistence and co-development with women integrated along the whole process. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Thinen. I now move to Dr. Sanam Naragi Andalini. Kindly keep to the 5 minutes, please. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Greetings to you from London. I wish I was there with you. I wanted to thank my hosts in Vietnam, not only for reminding us that the effects of war last decades beyond when the times of peace negotiations or peace is agreed. So this is a really important issue right now as we look at Afghanistan and Yemen and all these places where they're still struggling to have a peace agreement. The impact is going to be ongoing, and it's really important to think about what my colleague from Switzerland said about implement. Secondly, I wanted to congratulate you on Resolution 1889. It's an extraordinary document. I hope that we can implement it and build on what was included in it. It is a transformative framework building on 1325. So thank you for that. Thirdly, I wanted to thank my previous speakers and colleagues for raising so many of the issues that I don't have time to raise, but I want to affirm everything that you've said and just share my thoughts. For 20 years, I was involved in the drafting of 1325. I was on the standby team of the UN in 2011 to get women into peace processes. I have helped create networks of women peace builders, mentoring them, generating resources and getting funding to women's organizations on the ground. I say all this to say that I have been practicing what I preach for 20 years and really trying to learn what it means to implement the vision and the values that we have. And the good news, the truly good news, is that it's possible. It's possible, and when you do it, it works extraordinarily well. I'll give you the example of COVID that you asked for. This year, when COVID hit at ICANN, we pivoted our strategy to enable resources to be channeled directly to our partners on the ground in over 40 countries. We worked with our donors who trusted us when we said, please let us have flexible funding and get the resources down. Yet just last week, I spoke to my colleagues in Yemen. They started doing PPE and providing care and mediating with the militias. As a result of the health work that they were doing and the community work, they're now being invited to speak on the security issues and the dialogues. In Cameroon, similarly, women were the ones who were doing all the community outreach, and now they're working with, the government has asked them to be involved in the peace process. When you have peace builders on the ground, who are the people who run to the problem, who are trusted and who care, when we invest in them and we invest in what they have, the work amplifies itself. The bad news is that we have $1.9 trillion last year dedicated to the military expenditure and defense, and $1.92 million, $1.9 million to women's organizations. We need to rebalance these things. We need to look at places right now where the peace processes are going on, like in Afghanistan and elsewhere, and say, what can we do today to make sure that the voice of women peace builders is at the table? Invite them, do what Nelson Mandela did 10 years ago, and invite women peace builders to come and negotiate in parallel if necessary, but bring them to the tables. We need to protect them, as we've heard from our colleagues. At ICANN, we have been doing this work, we have been providing the frameworks, and I would like to submit for consideration to Vietnam a three-part operational framework on the recognition and inclusion of women in Track 1 processes, protection of women peace builders on the ground in countries, especially in places where they're being attacked by their own governments. And thirdly, to a framework for the equitable distribution of resources. It's not about adding new money, it's about making sure that money goes into the right hands at the right time. We know it can be done, we have been doing it, and we beg of you to work with us collaboratively. We cannot wait anymore. All the commitments have to be translated into action this year in the peace processes of Libya, Syria, etc. Women peace builders are on the ground. They don't need empowerment, they need enabling, they need to be heard. And I welcome you to come and join us and work with us, as many of the governments that we have currently around the table have been doing. Thank you very much. I'm going to give back the floor with 44 seconds left for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for keeping within the time and for your remarks. Last but not least, if I may turn to our speaker from Colombia. Madam, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Very good evening for all of you from my good morning on the other side of the world. We have exactly 12 hours time difference between the two countries, so it is really impressive to be with you today in this meeting. Thank you very much to the United Nations, to the Vietnamese government for hosting and supporting and organizing this event in this very important year where we are commemorating 20 years of Resolution 1325 and its related resolutions, in particular 1889. I live in a country full of lights and shadows. Colombia is in the north of America, of South America, and we share with Vietnam the production of coffee for the world. Our shadows and lights have to do with the peace agreement that was signed 4 years ago. As you know, this is one of the most gender-inclusive agreements in the world has had. And it was the result of a joint effort of women's organization, the negotiation table, and the international community. An icon for history. However, in everyday life, we feel the implementation of the agreement is slower than we would have wanted. Meaningful participation of women requires profound changes, changes that are opposed by those who sustain systematic violence and exclusion of women. There is still much work to be done. First, there is a real need to address the fear that the transformation of women towards equality with other actors does not mean a danger for societies. Cultural fears, discrimination, and violence have been and remain the most important glass ceilings for Security Council resolutions to become reality. The Women, Peace and Security agenda speaks above all about peace, of its importance. Peace is an ever-changing utopia that undoubtedly drives humanity. But in more concrete terms, peace implies dignified conditions for the life of all, a life free of misery and terror. For the achievement of these conditions in everyday life, civil society, and in particular women and non-binary people, require enabling and safe environments. So security is a fundamental component of this agenda, a component that has been largely ignored or in the best case that has focused simply on women's protection. We need a new security paradigm that addresses the changing nature of violence, and women need to play a key role in this paradigm shift. How are we going to transform the conditions so that women can speak out, participate, and propose without putting ourselves in danger? In my country, human rights defenders, women peacemakers, social leaders, and ex-combatants are killed every day in a number that no one can understand. Many women in Colombia argue that security is in crisis because the old paradigm of the private space and the public space have died. The private and the public have ceased to be two separated spheres where security in the house and on the street are definitive. The COVID-19 pandemic has shown worldwide how in conditions of humanitarian crisis and uncertainty by war, conflict, and disease, women in their diversity are still highly affected. The figures of violence against women, according to official data, have risen in a surprising way in all the moments of lockdown, as well as the numbers of deaths in defense of peace and the rights of people in peace building. This talks us directly saying that changes are still to be done, that violence is there, and we will keep seeing them in paper, but not in practice in sustainable changes. Peace and security are dynamics that move at the same time. From a feminist approach like mine, it is important to work on both simultaneously. A transformative peace needs a transformative and transformed security, a security that recognizes diversity and difference, with bodies that embrace difference. It must move away from colonial postulates and embrace new forms of expression so that it is able to understand places situated in a global as well as local context, a global a local context. We need to understand that there are blind spots that reason does not see, that women's life experiences redefine security for a different angle, and therefore fundamental changes current security paradigms. The global and the local dimensions are in conversation, but the conversation has changed. We local women are global. The world can no longer dialogue in another way. Therefore, meaningful participation means that security is transformed and peace is built with everyday peace. The Women's Peace and Security Agenda must take a leap forward to reconceptualize, redefine, and build a concept of security that starts with the individual and human collectives, and not with states and polarized and economic notions that have not brought enabled context for peace from women. To continue implementing the Women's Peace and Security Agenda, we need to be alive and with space to work and to implement the agreements. For negotiation, victims are the centers. For implementation, civil society and women must be in the center. We need to have the ways and financial support to do research, to practice, to do advocacy and lobby, to change security frameworks for dialogue, mediation, and peace. We need to talk loud in the security sphere with new words. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Muchas gracias. And thank you to all 11 excellent speakers and speeches. We now have about half an hour discussion time. I already know that there are a number of people wishing to intervene. Without further ado, I will ask the ambassador of Morocco. Sir, you have the floor, but only for 2 minutes. Please stick to the time. Can someone bring the mic quickly? Mic? Can we have mics ready in all the areas?
Thank you. Allow me first to extend my sincerest thanks to the Vietnamese Ministry of Foreign Affairs and UN for organizing this important event. While significant progress has been made since the adoption of Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security, the review of its enforcement is far from satisfactory. Let me share with you some elements from the perspective of the Kingdom of Morocco. Strong political will and the full commitment of member states to the provisions of Resolution 1325 will enable the active participation of women in national, regional, and international institutions for the prevention, protection, and management of conflict situations. Indisputable evidence, as the comprehensive studies highlight, has shown that women's participation leads to more sustainable peace. Yet, women's knowledge and experience are too often excluded from peace processes. The lack of resources is an important issue to be dealt with during our discussions. If we expect to achieve real changes, political commitment must be accompanied by sustainable financing. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development emphasizes the centrality of gender equality and the need to step up our efforts for women's empowerment to achieve Planet 50-50. Our strategies for implementing Resolution 1325 must be aligned with the vision of the Sustainable Development Goals. The new constitution of the Kingdom of Morocco stipulates the primacy of international conventions, prohibits discrimination based on gender, established men-women equality in all fields, and promotes the participation of women. It has also established mechanisms in order to achieve parity and effective equality between men and women. In addition, the Kingdom of Morocco is committed to strengthening the role of women in building sustainable peace and increase their participation in peacekeeping operations and in decision-making process. To conclude, let me reiterate that Morocco, with its all partners, will remain strongly engaged in the advancement of gender equality and women empowerment issues at all levels and areas of work at the United Nations. In this respect, Morocco is in the process of elaborating a national action plan for the implementation of Resolution 1325, following best practice and whole of government and the whole of society approach in close cooperation with UN Women. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ambassador, for your intervention. I will now call upon the Deputy Foreign Minister of Egypt, who is online. Sir, please take the floor.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to thank the government of Vietnam and UN Women for organizing this timely event as we are celebrating the 20th anniversary of the adoption of Security Council Resolution 1325. This resolution laid the first block in the institutional and international legal framework for the agenda of women, peace and security, together with the 25 years of the adoption of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action for Gender Equality and the Empowerment of Women. This resolution also established the foundations and international rules for women's rights comprehensively in times of peace, armed conflict, and post-conflict. Egypt is currently developing its first national action plan on the implementation of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda. The Cairo International Center for Training, Conflict Resolution, Peacekeeping and Peacebuilding, and the National Council for Women carry out many activities in peacekeeping and peacebuilding, especially in Africa and the Arab region. Egypt deployed 10 policewomen within the UN peacekeepers in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which was the first Egyptian female police participation of this size, and Egypt is seeking to gradually increase such participation, believing in the importance of women in peacekeeping operation, noting that Egypt, with its female police contribution, has already reached global required level. We emphasize the importance of women participation in the negotiating table and building their capacities to be able to participate effectively in peace negotiations and peace building. Egypt has a great role in establishing the global alliance of regional networks of women peace mediators. In 2017, Egypt called in the United Nations for the establishment of a global alliance of regional networks of peace mediators, and in 2018, in collaboration with UN Women, we sponsored the first meeting of the Global Alliance in New York. We recognize the grave and increasing threat to the global health posed by COVID-19, and that the pandemic is deepening existing inequalities and undermining sustainable development, which are disproportionately affecting women and girls, especially in conflict and post-conflict situations. Bearing this in mind, Egypt was the first country to issue a policy paper called Egypt's Rapid Response to Women's Situation During COVID-19 Outbreak, to trace the implications of the pandemic on women and girls and put gender-sensitive response to these implications. We issued till now 2 policy trackers to follow up on the implementation of this paper. On the international level, Egypt led an initiative at the UN for a General Assembly resolution together with Algeria, China, Saudi Arabia, and Zambia on the strengthening of national and international rapid response to the impact of COVID-19 on women and girls, including in armed conflict and post-conflict situations. We believe that women peace builders prove to be the leaders for the most vulnerable and marginalized communities, managing not only crisis setting, but fighting for sustainable, equal, and inclusive post-conflict society, access to health infrastructure, and bridging the digital divide, preservation of human rights, as well as economic empowerment and the inclusion of women in decision-making must be on top of every government's agenda, and women peace builders must be part of it. According to different reports from women peace builders, women and girls in conflict and post-conflict situations can face many challenges. However, there is a great opportunity for women peace builders to play a crucial role in mitigating the effects of these challenges, including mobilizing volunteers and creating social networks to support those most in need, and dissemination of information regarding COVID-19, as well as the involvement of women in decision-making process to tackle the virus and beyond. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency. I'll now call upon the permanent representative of Algeria, if he's online. I was told that he wanted to take the floor. It's not online. Would the ambassador of Algeria like to take the floor? It's not here. I believe the Deputy Director General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Thailand would like to take the floor. Is he online? Not sure. Algeria, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Over the past 2 decades, since the adoption of the UN Security Council 1325.
Okay, Thailand, please, and then I'll come back to Algeria. Thailand, please.
Okay, over the past 2 decades, since the adoption of UNSC Resolution 1325, Thailand has continued to advance the women, peace, and security agenda nationally and internationally. Thailand recognizes that women are effective agents of change and are important facilitators, actors, and decision makers at all levels. Thailand has adopted the national measures and guidelines on women, peace, and security in 2016 as a national plan of action. Furthermore, the National Women Development Strategy 2017 to 2021 provides a roadmap for advanced gender equality and women empowerment, which aims to promote the role and well-being of women at all levels to increase their effectiveness in women development and capacity building and assist women in need. Thailand also plays a key important role in the female peacekeeper. Thailand among the few countries that have the ratio of the female peacekeeper at around 130% for the peacekeeping troop from Thailand. And also we provide curriculum equal to the Chief of Staff, Joint Chief of Staff curriculum for the female peacekeeper. So the women can take leading role and can be the commander at the peace operation field. Also, in the next year, Thailand will be member for the Peacebuilding Commission for the term 2011 until 2021 until 2022. So we'll continue to emphasize the importance of women, peace, and security in our area. We stand ready to share our experience and lessons learned from our participants in PBC and our peace-building efforts with interested stakeholders. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much from Thailand. Can I call upon Algeria, please? I can see Algeria on the screen. It's the permanent representative of Algeria in New York. Okay. Would anyone here like to take the floor? Please. Ambassador of Spain.
Thank you very much. In 2015, Spain, as a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council, already promoted a high-level dialogue, debate at head of government's level, which launched the network of focal points for women, peace and security. We were host of the first meeting of this network that took place in 2017 in Alicante. Since then, in 2019, together with our Finnish partners, we have promoted the Commitment 2025, encompassing 10 commitments for states and 5 calls for United Nations. And together with our partners from the Netherlands, we have introduced an integral gender approach in EU missions. We have also introduced integral gender approach also in NATO. The objective now that we have an EU-ASEAN new strategic relationship gives us the framework to develop women, peace and security agenda also in this region. Our priority being to mainstream women, peace and security agenda into multilateralism, not only because it is a moral imperative, but because or out of effectiveness. If we truly commit to effective multilateralism, implementation of the women, peace and security is a must. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Muchas gracias. Ambassador of Azerbaijan. Ambassador of Azerbaijan.
Syria is ready, yeah?
Thank you very much, Kamal. First of all, I would like to thank organizers, to thank Vietnamese side and UN for organizing this kind of very important event. For us, for Azerbaijan, the importance is clear. The importance of protection of women in conflicts, in armed conflicts, is clear since Azerbaijan was involved in a conflict with neighboring Armenia. And in this regard, I would like to react on unfortunate misuse by Minister of Foreign Affairs of Armenia of this event for accusing Azerbaijan and Turkey. I would like to strongly reject these accusations. I want to say that it is clear, it is well known that 20% of the territory of Azerbaijan has been occupied almost 30 years ago. In 1993, there were adopted 4 resolutions of United Nations Security Council, which clearly demanded full, immediate, and complete withdrawal of, and unconditional withdrawal of Armenian armed forces from occupied Azerbaijani territories. And unfortunately, those resolutions have been not implemented. So recently, Azerbaijan has reacted on constant violations of ceasefire and open military operation in order to implement those resolutions, which unfortunately by diplomatic way have not been implemented. So the territorial integrity of Azerbaijan has been restored during the 44 days continuing military action. And by the way, during that, the war, the last war, Azerbaijani cities and villages were, let me finish because the matter is really very important. Our cities and villages were, bombed by Armenians. So when the Armenian side accused us on different issues, they first should watch on the mirror and look at, and themselves, they will firstly see the war criminals, those who kill innocent people, and it happened during the war as well when they committed genocide, which called Khojaly genocide. And this was my reaction on the words of Minister of Foreign Affairs of Armenia. And if I may, Kamal,
we are
just
talking
a
about
few words
women,
on
peace and security here.
Yeah, on the topic, regarding this topic, if I may, actually, the protection of women during the war, conflicts, as I mentioned, it is important, and if it would be also considered in connection with implementation of Geneva Conventions of 1949, which also call for protection of civilians, including women, I think it would be even more useful, good, and I have some more comments, but because of the time limit,
yes, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. May I turn back to Algeria? I believe Algeria is on the line now.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, Excellencies, honorable participant. First of all, my foreign minister was supposed to attend this important meeting, but due to last-minute commitment, he was not able, unfortunately, to be with us, and I have the honor to deliver his statement. I would like to start by underlining that Algeria's commitment to the promotion of women's rights has been made concrete through mechanisms for the political empowerment of women. They have now become a main actor in decision-making through their strong participation at the level of national and local elected assemblies, as well as their access to positions of responsibility. Algeria pays particular attention to women as actors of peace, both at the African and international level, through the implementation of the African Union Agenda 2063, the African Decade for Women 2010-2020, and through the achievement of the goals set in the Beijing Platform for Actions and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. As part of the implementation of Resolution 1325, Algeria has adopted a national action plan, which will serve as a roadmap for the government and the various stakeholders to define the country's priority in the promotion of the role of women in peace processes. This action plan, which will soon be validated at all stakeholders, has been elaborated by a multi-sectorial and multidisciplinary committee, including representatives of civil society. In addition, and within the League of Arab States, Algeria has constantly reaffirmed the role of women in the settlement of conflict and the consolidation of peace in the region. In 2019, my country chaired the 38th session of the Arab Women Commission, which set up the Emergency Committee for the Protection of Women in Armed Conflict and enabled the creation of an institution dedicated to peace. In this context, Algeria has appointed a woman ambassador to be part of the mechanism dedicated to mediation entitled Mediator for Peace, set up by the Arab Women Commission in February 2020. At the level of the African continent, the role of women, who are the main victims of conflicts, crisis, and forced displacement, remain major. In this regard, particular emphasis is placed on the need to strengthen the participation of women in peace processes and conflict management in all the legal instruments adopted by the African Union. In this context, Algeria hosted in December 2017 the first General Assembly of Pan-African Network of Women Mediators under the theme Silence the Gun by 2020, Women Mediating and Promoting Cross-Border Cooperation. This network, the creation of which was endorsed by the head of state and government of the AU, aims to institutionalize the place and the role of women in peace negotiations. Thus, all of the decisions taken at the African level at the initiative of Algeria enshrine the principle of equality between men and women. For example, the African Union and its organs include this principle in the performance of their missions. Finally, the success of our common endeavor in this regard will also depend on the reinforcement of the role of women as actor in international mediation processes in order to achieve peaceful settlement of disputes. In this regard, Algeria calls for the strengthening the place of women in international and regional organizations. In addition, we believe that it is important to strengthen the presence of women in peacekeeping operations. To be successful, this commitment should be accompanied by adequate training to enable women to master all aspects of peacekeeping processes. I would like to conclude by stressing that 20 years after the adoption of Resolution 1325, it is up to us to continue our joint action to meet the challenge of ensuring greater representation of women in national institutions and mechanisms at the regional and international level for the prevention, management, and settlement of disputes in order to build and sustain peace throughout the world. And I thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. Thank you. I'm glad we were able to connect to you. Are there any other hands up? Yes, please. Please take the floor. Kindly introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. I'm Ali Qayyum Raja, and I'm the head of commercial wing from Embassy of Pakistan. Let me start by thanking our hosts for organizing this event commemorating the 20th anniversary of the adoption of landmark UN Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security. Pakistan has been a strong supporter of this resolution and its objectives from the very start. This is in line with our long-standing policy on protection of rights of women and promotion of gender equality, derived from the vision of our founding father, Qaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah. And I quote him, "No nation can make any progress without active involvement of women." Pakistan has one of the most progressive legislative frameworks in the region for the protection of women and child rights. Current government is working on strengthening institutional capacities and mechanisms for women's rights protection. Today in Pakistan, women are actively involved in political sphere, from Prime Minister to Speaker National Assembly to flying fighter jets, leading ministries, concurring summits, and rising to high ranks in the military. Pakistan is one of the largest troop contributors to the UN peacekeeping missions. In line with Resolution 1325 of enhancing the role of women in peacekeeping operations, Pakistan has achieved UN's target of deployment of 15% female officers in UN peacekeeping missions. We were the first ones among the troop contributing countries that signed the Compact for the Elimination of Sexual Exploitation and Abuse. The Prime Minister of Pakistan also joined other world leaders in the Circle of Leadership on Sea. It is critical not to forget the grave human rights and violations and crimes against humanity in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir in gross violation of Resolution 1325. Without holding perpetrators of such heinous acts to account, especially in occupied territories and disputed regions around the globe, we will not be able to achieve the desired objectives of Resolution 1325. Excellencies, we all strive for a peaceful, secure, and prosperous world. There cannot be lasting peace without protecting the vulnerable segments of the society, especially the women and children. Dividends of peace and security can only be achieved collectively. I thank you all.
Thank you. We are approaching the end of our 2-hour period. If I don't see any other hands up or any hands on the screen, so if there are no further comments or questions, allow me to take a few minutes not to summarize what has been an incredibly rich set of statements and presentations, but to just highlight a few of the major strands that I saw emerging from this, and in the framework of the 3 questions that I posed to the panelists. What seems to be clear is that there seems to be a strong view that we should be proud of the strong normative framework that has been put in place over the last 20 years. And that is perhaps the major achievement of the last 20 years. However, and this was repeatedly stated, I believe the Swiss representative to the United Nations said, implementation, implementation, implementation. And I'd like to repeat that because it seems to be key to the next 20 years, that we have a strong normative framework, we have a number of commitments that have been made, but many of those commitments have not been translated into action. And that, therefore, a top priority going forward is not to spend that much time trying to create another framework or perfect the framework, but to actually implement it and to have action. This seemed to be, at least to me, one of the key messages to take forward into the subsequent discussion. And key to that is the issue of national action plans. While, as was stated in the UN Women Executive Director opening statement, the number of national action plans has risen significantly. It is still not at the level that we need. Half the member states do not have national action plans. And so we are not going to be able to implement this if there are no national action plans. So it seems to me that and that, of course, is the topic of Plenary 2 tomorrow, national action plans. But it seems to be a crucial missing link between the normative framework and implementation and action. So I would stress that as a top priority for the next 20 years. Not just coming up with national action plans, but resourcing them and having them implemented. The other set of issues, of course, relates to both the key security threats that are being faced currently, COVID-related, post-COVID related, and the need, and of course we have Plenary 4 to focus on that, but I do want to highlight that already emerging are the range of non-traditional security threats, from climate security to pandemic security to cyber security to other types of security, which the Women, Peace and Security framework will need to grapple with, and which will need to be incorporated into the Women, Peace and Security framework going forward. And last and most central, of course, the reaffirmation of the central role of women and gender issues in the peace and security agenda. I do believe that it is both a matter of fact and experience that where women have been involved in peace and security processes, they are likely to be much more sustainable. And that, therefore, emphasizing further the enormous contributions that women have made, can make, and should make to the Women, Peace and Security agenda will need to be central in anything we do going forward, including, of course, in all the non-traditional security areas. So far, the role of women in climate security, I would argue, has not been as central as it should be. It should be central clearly in health system security, where women have played a crucial role. But in anything going forward, we need to re-emphasize, to strengthen the contributions and the role of women to peace and security. And as the United Nations Resident Coordinator, I would be remiss if I didn't end by saying that all of this is related to Agenda 2030 and achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And that the Women, Peace and Security agenda is central to helping us achieve Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals, even more so in a post-COVID world, and helping us build forward better, which is a term I prefer to building back better. So I think in terms of building forward better, this agenda will be even more central to all our futures. So I'd like to thank you. I'd like to thank all the speakers, the keynote speakers, the panel speakers, and everyone here physically present. It's a late hour here in Hanoi. It's 10:30 at night. And I thank you all for being with us. I thank you again to all the speakers for contributing. And I hope that you've all found Plenary 1 to be a useful panel and a useful platform for beginning to raise many of the issues that we will continue to take forward tomorrow and on the third day. I thank you. Good night, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Xin trân trọng cảm ơn ông Kamal Malhotra. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Ladies and gentlemen, the first plenary session has now come to a close. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, the panelists, and all of you for having spent the time. Tomorrow's program will continue with 4 parallel sessions for you to participate in. It will be followed by the second plenary session and the third plenary session at 6:30 and 8:30 at the Grand Ballroom. Once again, the organizers would like to thank you and see you again tomorrow.
The first plenary session now closed. Thank you, moderator.